When my boyfriend proposed to me at the class reunion, his first love suddenly showed up. She was wearing exactly the same little black dress as mine. Asher. No matter how similar the copy is, it's not me. Asher didn't even look at her. He focused on putting the ring on the middle finger of my left hand and said, "Talia, will you marry me?" But I could clearly feel that the hand he was holding mine with was trembling slightly. I was at a loss for a moment. We had been in a relationship for 2 years. And I had been waiting for this day for a long time. But when I opened my mouth, I found that I couldn't bring myself to say the following words. Not getting my reply, Asher looked up at me and gently repeated, "Talia." At this moment, there was even a hint of vulnerability and pleading in his usually calm and emotionless eyes. My heart softened immediately. "I will." At the same moment when I said this, Scarlett beside us sneered and walked over on her high heels, then sat down on her own. She was wearing the same little black dress as mine, with the same long curly chestnut hair as mine. Her lips were bright red. Extremely glamorous. The look she cast at me was blatantly disdainful. It was as if she was looking at a knockoff. A substitute. In the stagnant atmosphere, it was their class monitor who stood up first and took the lead in clapping. All right. Asher has finally proposed successfully. Let's all raise a glass together. Success? Scarlett looked over with a smile. Asher, do you think your proposal is successful? Asher said coldly. It has nothing to do with you. He paused for a moment, then took my hand and sat down again. Perhaps it was a coincidence that our seats happened to be directly opposite Scarlett's. And every word and deed of hers clearly fell into my eyes. Scarlett picked up the red wine in front of her and took a sip. And she turned her head and said something to the man beside her. I didn't know what they were talking about. But Scarlett was laughing beautifully and unrestrainedly, with a charming glow in her eyes. Suddenly, I understood why the look in her eyes when she looked at me was full of disdain. Even though I dressed up so much like her, I didn't have the same unrestrained and charming aura as her. It was like the story of Dawn, she imitating she. These 4 words came to my mind. I lowered my eyes in embarrassment and asked Asher in a low voice, "Why did you give me this dress?" Asher was silent for a moment. "Because I think it suits you very well." "Does it suit me?" I opened my mouth, wanting to say something. But in the end, I just remained silent. Somehow, I suddenly remembered what happened 2 months ago. Encouraged by my best friend Chloe, I dyed my long hair that I had kept for several years into chestnut color, and also had it permed into big waves. And next day when I went on a date with Asher, when he saw me, there was a momentary daze in his eyes. His eyes clearly fell on my face. But it seemed that he was looking at something else through me. I asked him softly, "What are you thinking about?" "Thinking of you." He came to his senses, reached out his hand, and gently stroked my hair. "This looks very nice and suits you well." A few days later, Asher gave me this little black dress and a lip glaze in maple red. These things were completely different from my usual dressing style. But Asher hugged my waist, buried his face in my shoulder socket, and said in a hoarse voice, "Talia, wear them for me. Okay?" I couldn't resist him like that. Actually, Asher was a rather cold person in character. The female colleagues in the company occasionally talked about him and called him the flower on the high mountain. After we got together, most of the time, he still maintained an indifferent and self-restrained state. We even seldom kissed. The few times we did, it was like a dragonfly skimming the water, brief and light. But that day, when I first put on this little black dress and stood in front of him with the maple red lip glaze on, Asher suddenly stood up and strode towards me. I had never seen him lose his composure like that. After staring at me for a moment, he lowered his head, pinched my chin, and kissed me forcefully. "Talia." Asher's voice pulled me back from my memories. I came to my senses and saw that he picked up a shrimp, carefully peeled off the shell, and put it into my bowl. The little bit of joy in my heart suddenly cooled down the moment I saw Scarlett on the opposite side. The man beside Scarlett was wearing gloves and was concentrating on helping her dismantle a crab. She just sat there calmly, raised her charming eyes, and looked in our direction provocatively. Throughout the whole meal, Asher took meticulous care of me. But I couldn't be happy at all. Before we got together, I knew that he had a first love named Scarlett. They had been together for half a year and broke up on the eve of graduation. It was said that Scarlett was going to study abroad, and she couldn't accept a long-distance relationship. When I got together with Asher, he had already graduated for 2 years. 2 years should be enough to forget even the deepest feelings. Let alone that they had only been together for half a year. I had always thought so. But today, after seeing Scarlett, I suddenly realized that perhaps Asher had never completely forgotten her. Even, he had been always trying to find the shadow of Scarlett in me. If he couldn't find it, he would try to make me look more like her. Suddenly, a sharp pain stabbed my heart. I pressed my hands on the table and stood up, clenching my fingers until they turned white. "Excuse me. I need to go to the washroom." "I'll go with you." Asher stood up and was about to follow me. But then Scarlett's lazy voice sounded behind us. "You two have such a good relationship. You're reluctant to part even when going to the washroom. Why don't you just tie yourselves together with a rope?" After saying that, she laughed on her own. Her laughter was unrestrained yet pleasant to hear. Asher's steps suddenly stopped. He looked at me with a gloomy gaze, emotions flickering in his eyes. And finally, they condensed into a pitch-black darkness. "Go ahead," he said softly. "I'll take you home later. Actually, my appearance is rather plain, and bright-colored lipsticks don't suit me. But because it was given by Asher, I often wore that lip glaze." Standing in front of the mirror in the washroom, I vigorously wiped the color on my lips with a wet tissue. I didn't bring makeup remover wipes, and this matte lip glaze was especially difficult to remove. I used a bit of force, and my lips were rubbed painfully. I don't know how long it took, but finally, I wiped off the lip glaze. However, there were many small bleeding wounds on my lips. I smiled at myself in the mirror with the messy makeup and then turned around and left. When I went back, the reunion had already ended. The door of the private room was ajar. Just as I was about to push it open, I heard Scarlett's voice from inside. "I heard from the class monitor that you hadn't come to any of the reunions in the past few years. But this year, you suddenly came and even brought your girlfriend to propose. What? Were you putting on a show for me?" My hand tight and silently on the doorknob. After a moment, Asher's voice rang out, sounding cold. "Of course not. Don't flatter yourself." Am I flattering myself? Or are you afraid to admit it? I pushed the door open and just saw Scarlett leaning forward and kissing Asher on the lips. Hearing the noise, they both looked in my direction at the same time. Asher's face turned a little pale while Scarlett had a brilliant smile. She picked up her bag and walked towards me with an unruffled air. At the moment when we passed by each other, she stopped, turned her head, and said in a voice that both Asher and I could hear, Baby, your fiang tastes good." Before seeing Scarlett with my own eyes, I had heard Asher's friends mention her. She was the most popular goddess during their college days. There were many boys who liked her, and she herself was a carefree and unrestrained person who changed boyfriends as frequently as changing clothes. Although Asher had only been with her for half a year, it was already her longest relationship. When she walked past me, the fragrance of her perfume floated over, sweet and familiar. Last month, Asher gave me a bottle of exactly the same perfume. A strong sense of humiliation surged in my heart. I subconsciously clenched my hands hanging by my side until my fingertips turned white. Talia. When I came to my senses, Scarlett was already gone. And Asher, who had been by the window before, had come to me before I knew it. He carefully reached out his hand, as if he wanted to hug me. I took a step back and avoided his hand. "You're dirty." I tried my best to make this sentence sound calm, but there was still a hint of uncontrollable trembling in my voice. Hearing what I said, Asher's face suddenly turned pale. He raised his hand and wiped the lipstick mark cleft by Scarlett vigorously again and again, until there were many small wounds on it, and it began to ooze blood gradually. "Is it clean now?" he explained in a hoarse voice, staring at me unblinkingly with his dark pupils. "Talia, I originally wanted to avoid it, but you came in just as she touched me. I didn't have time." I was silent for a while and then asked softly, Why did you suddenly propose to me at the class reunion today? I just wanted our former classmates to be witnesses for me. Talia. You are the most important person to me now. I want to marry you. I broke up with her 4 years ago. I really didn't know she would come to today's reunion. I gave you those things just because they were my personal preferences. I admit that I tried to impose my personal aesthetic on you. It's my fault. But I didn't mean to make you a substitute for her. Never. He sounded very sincere. And his eyes didn't dodge at all during the whole process. As if he had a clear conscience. But I just felt my heart becoming more and more sour. After a moment, I took a deep breath and said slowly, do you know, Asher, we've been in a relationship for 2 years. And you've never said such a long speech to me before. Asher was stunned for a moment. And his expression gradually became solemn and cold. He opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, he just closed his mouth dejectedly. In fact, I was able to be with Asher because of my persistent pursuit. When he first joined the company, because of his good looks, many female colleagues had a crush on him. But he never agreed to go out for dinner with anyone. Coincidentally, at that time, I was in charge of several projects. Since I had to hand over part of them to Asher, it was natural that we had a lot more contact. I invited him to have dinner together. When I bought afternoon tea, I would bring an extra one for him. When he worked overtime until late at night, I would quietly put a cup of coffee on his desk. On the day when the project was successfully delivered, we worked overtime until midnight. After getting the news, we just bought 2 cans of beer from the vending machine downstairs, which could barely be considered a celebration. That night, the night wind was slightly cool. I opened the pull ring of the beer can, and the foam spilled all over my hand. When I was at a loss, Asher handed me a tissue from beside me. I was about to take it. But he didn't let go. He just wiped the foam on my hand bit by bit and then took the opportunity to hold my fingertips. Talia? He asked in a light voice. Are you chasing me? I was stunned and replied with a slightly red-eared tip. Yes. However, even though we had been together for 2 years, I still didn't know why Asher agreed to be with me at that time. After we got together, he wasn't actually too bad to me. He just didn't like talking and didn't like taking the initiative. I always convinced myself that he was just that kind of personality. But I ignored the fact that I was also a taciturn person in front of others. But after being with Asher, I would rack my brains to find topics and send him messages to share my daily life. Even our first kiss was initiated by me. But it wasn't because of personality. It was simply that he didn't love me enough. I told Asher that I wanted to calm down for a while. His eyelashes trembled slightly, hiding the dark emotions churning in his eyes. Then I'll take you home. No need. I looked down at the ring on my hand and still planned to take it off and return it to him. You'd better take this back. Before I could finish my words, Asher suddenly grasped my hand. His voice hoarse as he said, Talia, you've already accepted my proposal. You can't go back on your word. There was clearly a look of pain in his eyes. Watching him, I was momentarily in a daze. Had Asher, who had always been so calm as to seem indifferent, actually felt pain for me? When we walked downstairs, it was already completely dark. The location of this restaurant was rather remote. The streetlights were dim, and only a few cars passed by on the road. Asher turned around to look at me, his tone almost pleading. Talia, I know you're still angry, but it's really not safe at night. Just let me take you home. Okay? In the end, I agreed. There was no need to joke about my own safety. On the way home, I remained silent, absently looking at the scenery passing by outside the car window. On the contrary, Asher was trying hard to find topics to make the atmosphere in the car, which had almost dropped to freezing point, a bit more lively. I listened to him without saying a word until the car stopped at a traffic light. Suddenly, I said, if Scarlett hadn't broken up before going abroad back then, would you two have stayed together? Asher's hands tight and suddenly on the steering wheel. I looked at his knuckles that had turned slightly white from the force. And for some reason, I felt a soreness in my heart. Forget it. You don't have to. No. Asher interrupted me, turned his head to look at me. And there was a calm indifference in his eyes. Even when I was with her back then, there were always other people around her. I never thought that we were from the same world. But you're different, Talia. You're the only one I've ever wanted to marry. He said the last sentence very sincerely. The light from the roof lamp shone down, and it seemed that stars had fallen into his beautiful eyes. My heart softened for a moment. When I came to my senses, I avoided his gaze and said lightly, "The light's green. Let's go." A trace of gloom flashed across Asher's eyes. But he didn't say anything and silently started the car. After arriving home, he sent me a message, "Remember to put some medicine on your lips." I typed, "You too," in the chat box. But after hesitating for a moment, I deleted it word by word. The next morning, I went downstairs carrying a bag of garbage and saw Asher waiting downstairs at a glance. He chased after me, but when he saw what was in my hand, he was suddenly stunned. I expressionlessly threw the packed little black dress and perfume lip glaze into the trash can. When I looked at Asher again, his expression was flawless. Asher said softly, "Let's go to the company together." While in the car, I sent a message to Chloe. Asher came to pick me up for work. She replied with a shocked emoji and then asked me, "Are you going to forgive him?" I don't know. I really didn't know. In the following days, Asher picked me up and dropped me off on time every day. During afternoon tea time, he would bring me the food I liked. When we were alone together, he tried hard to find topics to talk with me. It wasn't that I wasn't touched, but I would always think of the scene on the day Asher proposed to me. The moment Scarlett walked in, his expression changed, and the hand holding mine suddenly tightened. Was he really over her? At the end of the month, the company sent me on a business trip to another city. On the day when I was about to go back, a sudden heavy rainstorm hit the local area. The backflow of water caused both traffic and communication to break down. I was stranded in the hotel room, waiting for a flight that I didn't know when it would depart. However, late at night on the second day, I hung up Chloe's call because of the network failure. Just as I was about to go to bed, there was a sudden and urgent knock on the door. I walked to the door warily and asked, "Who is it?" "Talia. It's me." After being stunned for a moment, I suddenly opened the door, was then pulled into a slightly damp embrace. "Asher," I said in a slightly hoarse voice. "How did you get here?" His warm palm was pressed against the top of my head, gently soothing me again and again. "I managed to hitch a ride on a truck delivering supplies." "Talia, I was just worried that you'd be scared." I was indeed scared. In the past few days, the signal on my mobile phone had been intermittent, and the whole city had almost become an isolated isle and cut off from the outside world. Although the water on the streets had gradually receded, the panic in my heart hadn't completely disappeared. Only now, leaning in Asher's arms, did a glimmer of light suddenly appear in my wavering heart. At least at that moment, I thought that he really cared about me. After going back, I cut my hair short, dyed it black again, and changed back into my old shirt and jeans. Asher didn't say anything. He even reached out to touch my short hair, curved the corners of his lips, and praised me, "It's so cute." However, just when I was almost about to forget about Scarlett, she suddenly appeared again out of the blue. That day after work, Asher and I went downstairs together. From a distance, we saw a familiar figure standing by the roadside. It was already early autumn and the wind was cool, but she was still wearing a well-tailored slip dress. The wind blew, making the skirt flutter and revealing her to slender calves. I could feel Asher's arm, which I was holding in my arm, stiffen slightly. My heart sank along with it. Seeing us, Scarlett walked over gracefully and said to Asher with a smile, "Asher, I have something to tell you alone." She didn't even look at me, as if I was just an insignificant passerby. Somehow, I suddenly felt like laughing. "Go ahead and talk. I'll leave first," I said, and was about to pull my arm out of Asher's arm, but he firmly grasped my wrist. He pursed his lips and turned his head to look at me, with a glint in his eyes. And he turned his head again and said coldly to Scarlett, "Just say what you want to say here." Scarlett's expression froze slightly, but she quickly regained her usual composure and nonchalance. "Asher, She reached out and pushed the hair blown by the wind behind her ear. I'm getting married. Scarlett handed over an invitation. Asher stared at the eye-catching ring on her hand for a moment and said lightly, "Congratulations." He never took the invitation. Scarlett's expression gradually became a bit stiff. She glanced over with her watery eyes. Then suddenly turned and handed the invitation to me. "Since that's the case, you can keep it for your boyfriend." Before I knew it, something was stuffed into my hand. I subconsciously pinched it. When I realized I wanted to return it, Scarlett had already turned and left. Her arrogant attitude rarely made me angry. I was just about to tear up the invitation when Asher suddenly reached out and took it from my hand. I was slightly stunned. "Are you going?" "No." Asher lowered his eyes, avoiding my gaze. "I just think that you don't need to get angry over someone who doesn't matter." Someone who doesn't matter. That invitation didn't seem to have any impact on Asher. He was still as considerate to me as before. And his attitude was much gentler. Once during a date, he arrived first. When I got there, I happened to see him resting his chin on his hand, looking absently at a place not far away. Following his gaze, I saw the backs of a couple. They should be 2 college students. The boy was tall and straight, and the girl had long chestnut curly hair. Her graceful back looked a bit familiar. I froze. Until the girl turned around. It wasn't Scarlett. Somehow, I let out a sigh of relief. When I turned my head again, I found that Asher had already walked to my side without my noticing. He took the bag in my hand and casually asked, "What would you like to eat tonight?" I was silent for a moment and then asked him softly, "Are you still thinking about her?" "Who?" "Scarlett." Asher's steps suddenly stopped. He turned around to look at me. Behind him was the blood-red glow of the sunset in the sky. His handsome face was reflected with a charming kind of vulnerability. "I was just thinking about my college days. Talia, it would have been better if I had met you at the beginning." He paused for a moment, and his gaze moved down and looked at the ring on my hand. "In the past 2 days, I contacted my parents. They'll come over next month. If possible, you can also contact your aunt and uncle. Talia, let's get married." Asher took care of almost everything regarding the meeting of our parents. He confirmed the time with my parents, reserved a private room in the hotel in advance, and even asked me to help choose a bunch of gifts for the meeting. However, my heart felt empty, as if it was being held up in midair by something illusory and couldn't land firmly. Chloe asked me, "Have you thought it through? Is it really going to be Asher?" At the moment of hesitation, I remembered the afternoon when he first joined the company. The supervisor asked me to go on liaison with the new project manager. The moment I walked into the meeting room, I happened to meet Asher's gaze. It was cold and aloof, yet with a lingering touch of nonchalance. He stared at me for 2 seconds, and then suddenly curved the corners of his lips. "Button." I was stunned. "Huh? Your shirt button. It's undone." I lowered my head, and my face instantly turned red and hot. I quickly turned sideways and hurriedly buttoned up the button on my chest that I didn't know when it had come undone. When I turned around again, Asher's expression had returned to calm. "All right. Now we can hand over the matters regarding the project." I think that was the moment when I fell in love with him. I've thought it through. I told Chloe. If the person I'm marrying is Asher, I'm quite willing. Day by day passed, and the time for the parents' meeting was getting closer. That night, I went to the high-speed railway station to pick up my parents, and then suddenly received a call from Chloe. "Talia." Her voice was a bit hurried, and there was still some hesitation in her tone. "You told me that the hotel where you and Asher are meeting your parents is called Springtime, right?" I was stunned. "Yes. What's the matter?" "I was passing by here after work to handle something and saw people hanging wedding wreaths and balloons at the entrance. The names of the bride and groom were written on them. And the bride's name is Scarlett." It was as if a thunderbolt had exploded in my mind, and my brain went blank instantly. "Talia, are you okay? Do you want me to come and accompany you?" Chloe's worried voice managed to pull me back to my senses. I came to my senses and found that I had bitten my lip so hard that it hurt. After a long while, I said somewhat hoarsely, "No need." Looking at my parents' expectant faces, There were some things that I really couldn't bring myself to say. The next morning, Asher drove to pick us up. All the way, heading to subway session. I didn't say a word. He probably also sensed something was wrong and took the opportunity when the car stopped to ask me, "What's the matter? Talia? Are you in a bad mood?" His expression seemed flawless. My eyelashes trembled slightly. And finally, I said, "Scarlett is getting married at this hotel today. Do you know that?" He looked at me, pursed his lips, and his expression turned solemn in an instant. I pinched my palm hard, trying to keep calm, but my voice still carried an uncontrollable tremble. From the last proposal to meeting the parents today. Asher, what do you think of me? Am I just a tool for you to get angry with Scarlett? Before I finished speaking, Asher suddenly pulled me into his arms. It's not like that. Talia. His voice paused for a moment, carried by the wind and blown into my ears. The emotions in it were indistinct. I reserved this place just because it's the best hotel in the city. As for the time, I don't know why it coincided with her. Talia. Believe me, if Chloe were here today, she would probably push Asher away without hesitation and scold him loudly. I don't believe you at all. But I'm not her. So in the end, I just closed my eyes, pushed Asher away, and said warily with my eyes downcast, "Today, both my parents and yours are here. I won't say anything. Even if we want to break up, let's talk about it when we're alone." Hearing the word break up, Asher immediately clenched my fingertips tightly. "We won't break up." His tone was very firm, like a solemn promise, though it was unclear who he was making it to. From the parking lot all the way to the private room upstairs, he held my hand all the time and never let it go. When our parents on both sides saw us like this, they all smiled. "You young people are so affectionate. Since the children have no problems, let's set the wedding date as soon as possible." While we were chatting happily, there was a faint sound of noisy music coming from outside. The waiter apologized and said, "Sorry. There's a wedding being held in the banquet hall upstairs today. And they are reading the vows now." Before the waiter finished speaking, Asher beside me suddenly stood up. I subconsciously reached out to grab the hem of his clothes but missed. In the astonished eyes of our parents, Asher composed himself and forced a smile. "It seems that I ordered the wrong flavor of soup before. I'll go to the kitchen and check it out." He walked hurriedly to the door. At the moment when he was about to go out, I called softly behind him, "Asher. Don't make it so ugly." Asher paused for a second at the door and finally didn't turn around. At that instant, I clearly heard something in my heart shatter. My mother was the first to notice my abnormality. She silently dragged a chair next to me and gently held my hand. "What's wrong?" Only then did I realize that my hand was trembling slightly and my fingertips were ice cold. "Mom." Taking a deep breath, I forced back the soreness in my eyes, propped myself up on the table, and stood up. "Asher has been gone for so long. I'll go and see what's going on." Actually, it hadn't been that long. It's just that every second after he left the private room was stretched infinitely long by the torment in my heart. I bit my lip and got into the elevator. I watched the numbers change from 8 to 9. And then the door opened. The lively atmosphere in the banquet hall suddenly froze. I saw Scarlett in a gorgeous wedding dress standing on the stage from a distance, surrounded by countless flowers. Asher was standing right below the stage, a few steps away from her, looking up at her, like a pious believer looking up at his muse. She looked at Asher with her affectionate, watery eyes, with a hint of tears at the corners of her eyes. But the corners of her lips were turned up. She said, "Asher, I knew you would come to take me away." There was an uproar in the banquet hall. Obviously, having fulfilled my say. This dramatic scene of snatching the bride, which was like something out of a movie, shocked everyone. I walked out of the elevator, walked towards Asher step by step, stopped a few steps away from him, and called softly, "Asher." He seemed to suddenly wake up from a dream, quickly turned his head to look over, and there was still a bit of daze left in his eyes. "Talia." I took a step back and suddenly dodged the hand he reached out to grab the hem of my clothes. Then announced softly, "Asher. You're free. Let's break up." In my imagination, When I said this sentence, my tone should have been cold and firm. But after I said it, I realized that my voice already carried an uncontrollable sobbing tone. With a ding, the sound of the elevator door opening came from behind. And then a rush of footsteps approached from far away, and stopped beside me. A warm and soft hand was placed on my shoulder. In the next second, a heavy slap landed on Asher's face. Great lover. Big fool. Can you stop looking like you're being persecuted by others? Chloe supported me and sneered at Asher with her eyelids raised. So reluctant to part, but your true love is still standing on the stage waiting for you. Look at her. I bet she would marry you even if you picked up a kin ring from the ground right now. Why don't you go quickly? As she said that, she took out her cell phone from her pocket and started taking pictures of Asher and Scarlett. Come on. Hurry up and take the vows. I'll record this beautiful scene for you too and post it online. Everyone won't need to go out to watch romantic movies on Valentine's Day next year. They can just watch you to act here. Scarlett's expression was extremely ugly. But Asher didn't look at her anymore. He just stared at me intently and carefully, looking so fragile that he seemed to break at the slightest touch. Sorry, Talia. He apologized to me. I just what? Couldn't help yourself? The last time? I came to my senses, let out a long breath, and looked at him infuriately. Asher, you're disgusting. His handsome face instantly turned as pale as paper without a trace of blood. However, I didn't feel relieved. Instead, the chaotic memories of the past 2 years kept flashing back in my mind. And in the end, they all shattered into ashes. I turned around, took Chloe's arm, and walked out. Asher was behind me, calling my name Talia over and over again. I never looked back. Not even once. I didn't feel the stuffy anger in my chest dissipate until I walked all the way to the lobby on the first floor. I turned my head to look at Chloe. Why are you here? She reached out and touched the ends of my hair, her tone gentle. I was afraid you couldn't handle those two scoundrels by yourself. The tears that I had been holding back all this time suddenly fell down after I heard her words. Since high school, Chloe had always played the role of my protector in my life. I was born introverted and taciturn. Every time I was bullied, she would stand up and fight back for me one by one. Shortly after I got together with Asher, I took him to meet Chloe. At that time, she gracefully reached out her hand, shook hands with him, and then said with a smile, "See this hand? If you dare to do anything wrong to Talia, it will turn into a big slap on your face." Unexpectedly, it came true. Chloe helped me straighten my clothes. After that suffocating emotion gradually subsided, I remembered that I should tell my parents. When I made the phone call, there was a faint noise on the other end, and then my father's angry voice came, "Let's go. Let's go. We won't have this marriage anymore." Later, I learned that they couldn't wait for Asher and me for a long time. Under the guidance of the waiter, they followed us upstairs and happened to see Asher holding Scarlett's hand and walking down the stage with her. The man who Scarlett was supposed to marry had a cold look in his eyes. "What do you think you're doing? Scarlett, you're breaking off the engagement." She turned her head back, with a disdainful look in her eyes. "You forced me to marry you from the beginning. I never wanted to marry you in the first place." Later, Chloe took my arm and ran into them in the lobby. My parents walked in front with lingering anger on their faces. Asher's parents hurriedly followed behind to explain. And Asher. Scarlett was wearing a wedding dress and holding his arm. Walking at the back, almost clinging to him. This scene was even more exciting than a TV series. My father walked up to me, saw Chloe, and his expression softened a little. Chloe took the opportunity to say, "Uncle, I drove here. Let's go." In-laws. My mother suddenly turned around and pointed at Asher's nose and cursed. "Who are your in-laws? Take care of your own son first. Since he likes this kind of disreputable woman so much, why did he come to harm our decent daughter?" It was chaos. In such an atmosphere, I looked at Asher quietly. He opened his mouth and suddenly seemed to react. "Talia." He called my name. I didn't respond for a moment. I just looked over his shoulder and happened to meet Scarlett's extremely glamorous face and her provocative and complacent gaze looking over. It was as if she was saying, See? No matter how hard you try. As long as I beckon, your boyfriend will leave you without hesitation and come to me. Yes, she was always the winner. But I had never been interested in competing with her. I looked at Scarlett calmly and silently told her with my lips. He's all yours. Asher was still explaining to me. Scarlett's family forced her to marry. To marry a good-for-nothing playboy. I just wanted to help her one last time. I nodded and said, opening my mouth, my tone calmer than I had imagined, go ahead and help. We've already broken up. It doesn't matter even if you help her for the rest of your life. In Asher's originally clear eyes, dark waves were churning. And finally condensed into a shadow but seemed as if it would never dissipate. He pursed his lips and asked me in a hoarse voice. You'll never forgive me. Will you? I suddenly felt tired. Raised my hand to rub my eyebrows. And then told him, I'm not forgiving you. Asher. I just don't love you anymore. In fact, getting out of this relationship was easier than I had imagined. Probably because the moment I saw Asher at Scarlett's wedding, I finally admitted to myself that he valued Scarlett far more than me. Even though I was his girlfriend at that time. Even though Scarlett was still having an on and off relationship with other men when we were together. And even though he had found me in the city that had turned into an isolated isle, and due to the heavy rain and then held me tightly. People are most afraid of making comparisons. I had always been hypnotizing myself with the thought that he's also been nice to me, until the truth became a sharp blade that repeatedly cut into my aching heart. Only then did I finally admit that if he had to choose between me and Scarlett, he would definitely walk towards her without hesitation. I took 3 days off at home. When I went back to work, I found that my colleagues were looking at me with strange expressions. As if they wanted to say something but held back. It wasn't until Chloe sent me a video link that I understood why. Someone had filmed the scene at Scarlett's wedding that day and uploaded it online. That absurd and ridiculous entanglement of love and hate was thus exposed to the world. There was Scarlett on the stage with teary eyes. Her gloomy-looking fiancé. And Asher, who seemed like a god descending to redeem her in the audience. I, standing in the corner, was just an inconspicuous supporting character. At lunchtime, Asher came and sat opposite me with his lunch tray. I looked up at him, paused slightly in my movements, swallowed what was in my mouth, and was about to pick up my bowl and leave. Talia, he called out to me, his voice carrying a cautious wariness. I've already contacted the person who uploaded the video to have it deleted. That was arranged by Scarlett to get rid of her fiancé. It wasn't me. Suddenly, I turned my face and looked at him expressionlessly. Are you done? Asher looked at me, and the light in his eyes dimmed bit by bit. For a moment I almost thought he was going to cry. She came to me crying, saying that there were problems with her family's business. Her parents forced her to marry a nouveau riche for the turnover of funds. I've already made it clear to her that that was the last time I'd help her. Talia, I didn't lie to you. I've only ever wanted to marry you. I just stood there quietly listening to him. This was a corner of the company cafeteria. Hardly anyone passed by. At this moment it seemed that there was an inexplicable atmosphere that separated us from the outside world. After Asher finished explaining and saw that I was still indifferent, a look of pain suddenly appeared on his face. Talia, can we start over again? His eyes were as clear as before. I looked into them and saw my own clear reflection in them. But it didn't mean anything anymore. Asher, I don't want you anymore. I finally said, telling him calmly. I've already submitted my resignation application to the supervisor. And he's already approved it. Asher froze in front of me. After a moment, he asked me with red eyes. Will you ever come back? I turned around and left without answering him. I spent 2 weeks handing over the projects in my hands to others. Then packed my luggage and planned to go home and stay for a while. On the day I left, Chloe said she would come to see me off, but she showed up carrying a suitcase. Facing my question, she smiled and reached out to rub the top of my head with some starlight glimmers in her eyes. I've taken my annual leave to accompany you home. I was afraid you'd be unhappy by yourself. Your parents have to go to work and can't always be with you. The plane passed through the clouds and sunlight and landed at the airport in my hometown. When we got back, Chloe naturally moved into my home. I didn't tell my mom that I was coming back. Otherwise, she'd arrange blind dates for me again. That night, the two of us were lying on the small bed in my bedroom, whispering to each other like we did when we were at school with our heads touching. I didn't tell you before. Last time I managed to come back for a short while. Damn it. In just 3 days. My mom arranged for blind dates for me. And none of them were normal. There was a small nightlight on at the head of the bed. By the dim and warm light, I saw the vivid expression on her face and suddenly burst out laughing. She puffed up her cheeks in anger and complained. "You're still laughing at me." I hugged the plush teddy bear that she gave me 8 years ago, and looked at her with a smile. "But your mom has a point. You haven't been in a relationship for such a long time. It's normal for her to be worried. When you bring a boyfriend home someday, she definitely won't push you to go on blind dates anymore. I have someone I like." Chloe was silent for a while and then suddenly said. I was a bit surprised and couldn't help sitting up and turning my face to look at her. "Really? Who is it? Have I met him? Do I know him?" She stared into my eyes under the dim yellow light. After a moment, she suddenly showed a smile brighter than the light. "It's a secret. Chloe and I stayed at home for a long time and went to many places that we used to love going to when we were at school." Memories came flooding back, bringing countless chaotic yet profound fragments. The trauma caused by that failed relationship before was gradually being healed. That evening, there was a damp and cold wind blowing in the air. Chloe and I sat down at a barbecue stand that we had been to before. However, after just a couple of bites, several drunk men at the next table suddenly surrounded us, shouting and asking us for our contact information. Chloe immediately shielded me behind her, raised her head and looked at them coldly. "No way. If you're drunk, go home to your mom. Don't go crazy in front of strange girls when you're drunk." Those men became angry out of embarrassment and reached out to touch us. "Get lost." Chloe raised her hand to block them. The slightly flickering light above her head flowed down, creating a water wave luster on the top of her hair. It was at this moment that Asher showed up. He caught the man's hand that was about to touch me in time, pushed him to the ground with force, and then got into a fight with those men. After the initial panic and surprise, I pinched my palm to calm myself down quickly and then called the police. It was already late at night when we came out of the police station after finishing the record. Asher's behavior was defined as an act of helping others bravely. Those drunk men who were asked Chloe and me were locked up in the detention room. It was said that they would be locked up for another 14 days after sobering up. By the light of the street lamp, I saw that Asher's hand was bleeding. After hesitating for a moment, I still reminded him, "You'd better go to the hospital and have your wound treated as soon as possible." He didn't respond. I hadn't seen him for half a month. He had lost a lot of weight. His hair had grown long and hadn't been cut, looking a bit more down and out than his previous cold and indifferent appearance. He was indeed charming. But my heart was completely unmoved. Chloe's cold voice suddenly rang out. "Why did you suddenly show up there? Since this morning, I felt that someone was secretly following us." It was you, wasn't it?" Asher still didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me silently and greedily. However, I didn't feel touched or disgusted. There was only boundless calm and indifference in my heart. It was at that moment that I truly realized that I really didn't like him anymore. "Thank you for saving me tonight," I said softly. "If you need it, I'll cover the medical expenses for the wound on your hand." Asher's eyelashes trembled slightly twice and finally he said, "I just wanted to see you again." What was there to see? I didn't understand. "Since we've completely broken up, you can go back to Scarlett. Actually, she's always been your ideal type, right? Since I was a child, I've never taken the initiative to do anything. When I chased you back then, it was because I really liked you so much at that time. So I abandoned my reserve and shyness and racked my brains to convey my feelings to you." He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something but I interrupted him. "The 2 years we were together were rather dull. You didn't like talking to me. And most of the topics I tried hard to find were also boring. Asher, I know you've always wanted to turn me into someone like Scarlett, but that's impossible. Even if I wore the same dress as her, used the same lipstick and perfume, I still couldn't become her. Before you proposed to me. Even before I knew that our parents' meeting and Scarlett's wedding were at the same hotel. I was truly sincere about marrying you. But now, I really don't like you anymore. Even when I saw him, I would subconsciously feel disgusted. Because that face that once made my heart flutter would no longer remind me of the countless details of our past relationship. Instead, all I could think of was the embarrassment at Scarlett's wedding that day. Pain and regret stirred up a huge storm in his eyes. After a moment, like a sweeping force, it took away all the emotions, leaving only a deathly silence. A sense of dejection spread. At that moment I felt that something seemed to be missing in Asher, and it could never be filled again. Several days after Asher left, I received a call from an unknown number. It was from Scarlett. On the phone, she questioned me in her usual haughty tone. "It's so strange. How could I lose to you? What's so good about you? Why did Asher finally choose you? I just found it funny. That's the conflict between you two. What does it have to do with me?" She was silent for a good while and then told me, "I got married." "Oh, congratulations then." "It wasn't to Asher." I was speechless for a moment, and then her voice came from the other side again. "I've had many boyfriends. But Asher is the most special one. Because so many people still couldn't forget me after breaking up. But only he found you as his new love so quickly, and even planned to marry you. Your appearance, family background, education, are all inferior to mine. Why on earth did he give up on me because of you? You should ask Asher himself about this question." I completely lost my patience, and was about to hang up the phone, when Chloe suddenly took my phone from me. "Lady, you're already married. Do you still have time to question your ex-boyfriend's ex-girlfriend about these things? If you're really that idle, you might as well go and carry the manure at the entrance of your village. It's so unhealthy to be always thinking about love and relationships. You might as well do something for society and the people." After saying the last word, she didn't give Scarlett a chance to reply and directly hung up the phone and blocked her number in one go. I looked at her and somehow really wanted to laugh. Chloe looked at me for a moment and then suddenly reached out and pinched my cheek gently. "Laugh if you want to. I did it to stand up for you." She rolled her eyes as she said this. "I think this woman is out of her mind and has some psychological problems. She always hopes that others will still be hung up on her after breaking up. Why should they? Does she think she's money? Maybe it's because she's pretty." Suddenly Chloe leaned closer to me, looked at me from left to right, and finally came to a conclusion. "Pretty? Just so. Actually, having fulfilled lion's sigh. I think you're prettier than her. That curly hair before didn't suit you. No. You're like a lotus emerging from clear water. You're so beautiful." As she said this, her long, slender and soft fingers were whirling a strand of my short hair, and her eyes were shining brightly. During this period of time, I haven't had my hair cut at all. The short hair that used to reach my ears has almost grown to my shoulders. Just like the hairstyle I had in high school. I smiled and said, "You're lying. It was you who urged me to perm my hair into curls before." Without hesitation, Chloe said, "Well, I was blind at that time." Seeing my speechless look, she smiled with her eyes curving instead. After having dinner, we walked slowly back along the parasol tree-lined path, which was chilly in late autumn. Coincidentally, we met two high school girls who were wearing school uniforms and walking arm in arm past us. Chloe stopped in her tracks at once and looked back at them. After a while, she turned her head and stared fixedly at me. "Talia, will we be good friends for a lifetime?" For a moment, I seemed to see a glint of tears in her eyes. But when I looked again, they were as lively and gentle as usual. I nodded firmly. "Of course we will. Then next time you fall in love, remember to let me know so that I can help you check him out." "Okay. During the spring festival. Please persuade my mom for me. I really don't want to get married." The moonlight that night was especially gentle. We talked all the way on our way home,